Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to wait a few more seconds here to allow everyone the time to connect, and then we'll kick things off. All right. So, welcome everyone to our webcast on the 2020 key trends and data for the Asia Pacific. So this morning, GWEC just released our data for the region, and this webinar gives us the opportunity to go deep dive into that data and look at key trends for wind power in the Asia Pacific region. This is part of a series of webinars we've been doing over the last few weeks in the lead up to our Global Wind Report, which is going to be published next Thursday. So look out for that and make sure to register also for our Global Wind Report launch, which will focus on wind power's role on the road to net zero. You can check out all of our past webcasts on GWEC's YouTube channel in case you missed any of those. Before we get started, just going to go over the program. So today we'll have a presentation from the head of GWEC Asia, Li-Ming Zhao, who will go over the 2020 data for the region. And then we are going to be joined by both GWEC and local experts for an expert discussion on the key trends. And then we'll go into an interactive Q&A. So throughout the webinar, you can submit your questions at any point using the Q&A panel. Right here on the Zoom toolbar. We'll be selecting questions, and the questions that we select will ask the attendees to actually join the panelists on stage and turn on your audio and video so that you can ask your questions directly to our experts, and it just makes the whole webcast a bit more interactive. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll be in touch if your question is selected. And then you can just turn on your audio here and video here like you would for any Zoom meeting once you join us on stage. So now I'll hand it off to Li-Ming, who will go over the 2020 key trends and data for wind power in the Asia Pacific. Over to you, Li-Ming.
Thank you, Alisa. Hello, everyone, and it's my pleasure to introduce the data and trends of Asia Pacific today. And before we start to roll into the statistics, I just want to share a couple of the big picture kind of issue of Asia Pacific, especially Asia, like in the past year. I think the first question that we kept being asked is the impact of COVID and how do we see COVID. So to start with that, I think Asia is really like the first region that really being affected by COVID. So in the first half of last year, we've seen very serious kind of impact on the supply chain, and also on various other parts, like affecting the product development, especially for like human resources to move in and out of certain countries. And these impacts are really big on certain markets like India, like Vietnam and Taiwan, and also China, which was started to recover, the first market in Asia that started to recover in the second half of the year, and actually in the end become like the biggest market really like in the region, which we'll talk a little bit later. But overall, those impacts in the other market that were kind of experience a little bit of dip were kind of catched up, almost all catched up by the huge kind of recovery from China. So overall, if you look at the regional market, the impact of COVID, yes, there are serious impact on certain markets, but overall, we do see a very much strong recovery throughout the whole year. And those markets that were affected were most of the product are being carried forward into the new year, into 2021, with a few exceptions where when there's kind of expiration date for certain policies, which is now happening in Vietnam. But there is possibility that the FIT will have certain kind of measures for like extension or other measures, which we'll wait and see. And the other trend, which I want to also talk about, is the net zero, which is a big theme of GWEC Global Wind Report, which will be released next week. And I advise everybody interested in this topic to stay tuned for that big release. But if I'm talking about Asia Pacific, Asia in specific, I cannot really go without talking about this concept, because what happened last year is that towards the end of the year, we saw 3 major Asia economies committing to zero emission by the middle of the century. And these including China, South Korea, and Japan. And I just want to share a few significance of these commitments from these 3 countries, which really will have like long impacts for the region for years to come. The first significance is that a few years ago, when the whole net zero idea was proposed, it was very much like started in the European countries, especially like the Scandinavian, like Denmark or like in Germany. And none of the people really, most of people doesn't really think that this could be the concept really accepted by Asian countries, especially those economies which are like the biggest emitter of the world. Like China is the world number 1 and Japan is the world number 5. And also to the economies that are really like on the track of fast growing. So I think the fact that last year we see these 3 economies committing net zero by mid of the century is really changing that whole concept or that whole mindset, making people thinking, oh, this is doable, and also this is doable in Asia. So I think that's the first significance. And the second significance is that it's related to the first one, but it also kind of started the whole competition and putting the idea into the other Asian countries' mind to think, okay, if they can do it, then maybe we can also do it, which is what we are seeing now, like in India and in Taiwan, that the government or the people are seriously talking about the possibility of adopting similar kind of target of net zero in the future, which is kind of like create that whole competition or create that whole idea like to further embrace that into other countries. And the third one is really it has that impact to the other Southeast Asia countries where energy transition is not even like widely accepted as a concept. But I think over the past 2 years, we slightly start to see that energy transition started to become like the topic. And I think with this whole net zero kind of movement started in the East Asia, in the more like affluent part of Asia, this can have a huge impact on the mentality, on the whole mindset of the government on embracing a much higher kind of renewable target in their national plans, which is happening now. And we'll talk about all of that later in the presentation. Then, so these are the kind of 2 big kind of like headline issues that I want to highlight before we dive into the statistics. And also, I think with all this as the background, and also with our industry really has been achieving like huge cost reduction progresses in the past decade, we are at the right time, or the kind of the best time in the history that we really have a very promising future in Asia for our sector, for renewable energy or the wind sector. And this is also going to be further consolidated by the fact that offshore wind is becoming also very much cost competitive, and also very much like started to emerge into more Asian countries' government kind of like site or agenda. And with all of that, then we'll start to look into the statistics. So basically last year, we're seeing a record year of installation for Asia Pacific, where we've seen new installation hit 55 gigawatt, 56 gigawatt, and that brings the total installation to 347 gigawatt. And this is a year-on-year 78% of increase. And the Asia Pacific, in terms of the new installation, is account for about 60% of the global new installation in last year, and about 50% of the global cumulative installation for last year. And the top 10 countries for wind installation are listed there. The first one is China with 52 gigawatt of installation, which accounts for 94% of the annual market, followed by India, 1.1 gigawatt, Australia, 1 gigawatt, Japan, 484 megawatts. Kazakhstan, 300 megawatts. We are really, really thrilled to see this number coming from Central Asia. And we also like have seen that very strong movements coming from not only Kazakhstan, but also Uzbekistan. Like all these countries are also very much moving towards the kind of higher share of renewables into their energy system. And then followed by South Korea, 160 megawatts, Vietnam, 125, New Zealand, 100, Sri Lanka, 88 megawatts from onshore project, and Taiwan, 74 megawatts, which is mainly the onshore. And in terms of the offshore wind installation, we saw China installed 3 gigawatts of offshore, which accounts for almost half of the global offshore installation, and another 60 megawatts from South Korea. And Taiwan, which is online, in the process of like installing a lot of their round 2 projects are experiencing some delays in terms of installation, which is why the Taiwan installation is mainly from onshore. Next, please. And if we further zoom into a few of the Asia market that I want to highlight, first one is China. As we said, it's 52 gigawatt of installation, which is by far the biggest of any annual installation in China, and also by far the biggest installation in any country, like in the history for wind. And this is very much driven by the expiration of the FIT, where the government indicate that the future project will move into subsidy-free or kind of like grid parity after 2020. And offshore, we've covered that. But in the future years, we will continue to see strong growth after in China, even after this rushes. And India, we've seen 1.1 gigawatt installed, which is by far the lowest number since 2004. And this is because of the COVID on the one hand, also because of some other constraints on the permitting process and other things. But we do see that India market to be like rebound very soon in 2021, and will continue to be so until 2023, which is driven by the interstate connection thing that is expired in 2023. And then Japan, where we've seen a huge number of installation from onshore, which is kind of the reason because a bunch of projects were undergoing and really passed the EIA kind of phase and started to come online last year. But what I want to highlight is that last year, towards the end of the year, we also see a very strong offshore kind of commitment, which is 10 gigawatt, which comes with a target, which is 10 gigawatt by 2030 and 30 to 45 gigawatt by 2040. And this will definitely be the biggest push for the offshore in Japan in the next 20, 30 years. And this is also coupled by the government's very ambitious kind of cost reduction kind of vision in the future. The last one that I want to highlight is Vietnam. This is the kind of the hot market in Southeast Asia. And what we actually see happening in 2020 is fall short of what we were forecasting. And this is very much being affected by COVID. And what we are going to see for this year is a big installation, which is driven mainly by the expiration of FIT by end of this year. And we are likely to see another like 3 gigawatt to be installed this year. And what I also want to highlight is that while we're speaking now, the PDP 8, Power Development Plan 8, is being drafted and also like being kind of consolidated by the government. And in that draft, we've seen very positively a strong support of wind, which including a target of 16 gigawatt in 2030. And that's a very, very big and significant increase from the original 6 gigawatt by 2030 in the previous PDP. And we are still advocating for a much more higher offshore target, which currently is 2 to 3 gigawatt, and we're advocating for 10 gigawatt. And we believe that Vietnam can do that. And so overall, that's kind of on my side on the statistics and on the big trends. I'll hand over back to Elisa. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Li Ming, for that overview. So now to kind of dive deeper into those key trends and data that Li Ming just went over, I'm going to hand it off to GWEX COO, Stuart Mullen, who is going to lead a discussion with some amazing experts from the region we have here today. So Li Ming will also be joining. We have Martin Chardou, who's GWEX new policy director, just announced this week, actually. We have Feng Zhao, who is head of GWEX Market Intelligence and Strategy and lead author on the Global Wind Report. We also have Wang Liang, who is GWEX China director, and joining us from the Chinese Wind Energy Association this morning is Dr. Yu, who is the general manager of the International Cooperation Department. So I'm going to hand it over to Stuart, and don't forget to submit your questions at any point throughout the webinar using the Q&A panel on your Zoom toolbar.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. And if you do come with a question, Alyssa will put you on stage, and so we'll get to those questions at the end. So what we'll do now is we'll take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so where we speak with our panel of experts, and then we'll get to audience questions towards the end of the session. But I guess given the huge growth in China over the past year, let's start with China. And Dr. Hu, I'd like to get your take on this. Have we seen all we can from China? Is China as big as it can get, or are will China continue with this rate of growth for the next decade?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Thanks for the question. First of all, I'd like to thank you, GWEC, for giving me the opportunity to be in the panel. Yeah, and for the number 52 gigawatts we saw in the slides, which is just a preliminary result because we are still counting the exact number, but we are not expecting a big difference from 52 gigawatts over here. And for the future, at the last of 2020, we issued the Beijing Declaration in the CWP 2020. We were expecting that there will be like 50 gigawatts for the coming years, but we do see the difficulties we are facing. So we're not expecting that much in 2021, which would be like a little more than 35 gigawatts, like 30 gigawatts for the onshore and 6 gigawatts for the offshore. But after we figure out the difficulties, I think those will be overcome within 1 or 2 years. The business model, the problems will be solved. I think we'll be on the way to reach 50 gigawatts by 2025.
Thank you very much for that. Feng, I'll bring you in now as well. So what's your take on what happened in China over the last year, and where do we see the market going? Do you agree with Dr. Hu?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Stuart. We all know, I mean, that's what of the key message we're going to deliver to the global audience in the report we're going to release next Thursday. So last year, 2020, if you look at the statistics webcast we have launched so far today, this is the last one. All the data indicate 2020 is a slightly unusual year, mainly driven by the change of the policy. Li Ming also highlighted at the beginning. For China, that's a specific case. So the message has been delivered, by the central government, already very clear from the middle of 2019. At that time, the Chinese government, specifically the National Energy Agency or National Energy Administration, already released what you call the roadmap, clearly indicating start from the beginning of this year, 2021, onshore wind are going to absolutely running on the model in terms of what some case we call grid parity, and the international media quoted as the subsidiary free due to the cut off of the onshore wind by the end of last year. So there are tremendous project pipeline. I remember when I was attend the previous years, the Tea Party were Dr. Wu was there as well. We saw some statistics that's presented by the Sevilla as well. Just in 2019 alone, I think something around 57 gigawatt onshore project has been approved. And so so if you're looking at the the project pipeline or approved already before 2020, so this shouldn't be any surprise. And also, the policy I mentioned, it's far clear, crystal clear. That's 1.5 years ago. So the industry was aware of that. The supply chain, of course, it's on top of that. We do see also Li-Ming mentioned in Q1, and GWAC also have what you call this co-statement made together with Sevilla almost the same time last year. We know there's a huge disruption in terms of travel restriction and input and key component from Europe, for example, like blade material and balsa wood from Ecuador in Latin America. But again, due to everyone on the same page, turbine OEM, developer, component supplier, BOP supplier, they are ready for that. So when COVID comes, or as soon as when the market resume the operation, they can quickly, put together resources, get the project built. So to some extent, it's a surprise. It is true, 52. That's the best year ever in history. But again, looking at what has been going on or what the industry are waiting for, so this shouldn't be a surprise for any inside of the industry. That's onshore. Offshore, again, 3 gigawatt, even though it's not really like in a single year more than 5 gigawatt, but we believe it will be there, for example, this year. But considering the bottlenecks we already covered in GWAC, different market intelligence product or conference, installation vessels and key material for blades, specifically for rotors larger than 80 meters, there is a slow ramping up. So again, 3 gigawatt, that's the best year, and also in history. Make China the largest market, already replaced Germany as number 2 in cumulative installation. Probably next year will make it the number 1, replace the UK as the cumulative or the largest offshore market. So in general, I think it is a surprise, but the industry, I think, was aware of what will come up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That's a very comprehensive answer. Wan Liang, I want to bring you in here now as well. You're on the ground in China. So one of the things that I would like to know is can you feel, being in China, can you feel or can you see the difference that this year has had, and how has I mean, Feng touched on this a little bit with the supply chain, but can you see how the supply chain has had to ramp up over the year, and what are the challenges that we're going to see moving forward? Also, if we have a drop in the numbers next year, what will that mean for the supply chain?
Yeah. Thank you, Stuart. Basically, the last year we can see is as a test of China's wind industry. But the result is obviously very good, that the supply chain can support or such a high installation like 50 gigawatt. Moving forward, Dr. Yu just mentioned that we might see some challenges in front, like the grid system, how to absorb a high percentage of renewable energies. But we believe that in 1 to 2 years' time, that such challenges will be solved, and we will see a similar level of installation for the coming years. 3 days ago, China just had a meeting by central government. It's mentioned clearly that to reach the emission peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, China will build a new type of power system, which will be dominated by new energy, which means the renewables will take the leading position in the future grid system. So in technology, I think that the power system will find a new solution and with new technologies to take more renewables in the system. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Then Dr. Huey, again, I'd like to bring you in here. Have you noticed an increase in the number of new members for the Chinese Wind Energy Association? Are we seeing that they're getting more interest? And as a result of this great year that we've had, are we expecting many more of these companies to want to go global with their offerings and move out of China and get into the spread into the rest of the world?
Yeah, thanks for the question. For the first question, actually, you do see more players in the game. First of all, for the OEMs, we do see more. I think this year is like 23 or 25, a few more than last year as OEMs. And for the developers, I think we stick to the old ones, but we do see other players, for example, from other industries, oil and gas industries, they also want to join the game to develop renewable energy projects. And the biggest difference I see in the past month is local governments. So CWEA has been in touch with lots of local governments already. And then we got phone calls even, for those governments we haven't been in touch with. They also come to us to see what they can do to join the game, because they also feel the pressure. And usually they have the resources, but they don't want to give the resources away. So they want to get something back with the resources. So they want to talk with the association. They want to talk with the developers. They want to talk with OEMs and also other industries. For example, construction industries, if they want to develop bring other companies to these regions, because they see that the resources and then green power would be a treasure of these regions. So they are also joining the game. We see this morning actually, and also last morning, we talked with two counties from Henan, from Gansu. So we do see a lot more players in the game. For the second question, to join the global, I think globalization is definitely the trend. I think we are also ready to join the game globally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. It's very interesting. And I know we're focusing a lot on China as a start, but I mean, those numbers and, the dominance of China from occupying so many gigawatts this year, I think it's worth spending some time on there. But if we move and have a look at the rest of the Asia, or Southeast Asia in particular, actually, if we speak about Asia first, Li Ming, you've touched upon some of the key markets that we're seeing. So China, Japan, and South Korea, and all setting sort of like ambitious net zero goals. What role will power be playing in achieving these?
I think definitely wind will play a big role, especially offshore wind. I think we've seen offshore wind as like the single most reliable renewable energy source that really can be the option to replace those that is currently like the incumbent, especially the fossil and other installations that currently are in their fleet. And the reason is that we've seen like the huge potential for offshore wind, and also the stability, the high capacity factor, and the scale, and also the, like I said, the cost reduction, that whole huge potential. And the good thing is that all these countries that currently committing net zero are also really look at this sector as the one that really providing the backbone for them to achieve that goal. I mean, apart from that, I think other sectors that are zero emission technologies are also playing their different parts. But I definitely do think that our sector, the wind sector, is kind of providing the backbone in achieving that goal. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so staying with you, Li Ming, here, You also mentioned there's been some Asian markets that have been, with also had good years, and you mentioned that there's markets coming online with bigger ambition in like Japan, etc. If we see into the future, if we look into the future, which markets that perhaps aren't on the radar today do you see coming onto the radar in the future, and when are they likely to, in your opinion, when are they likely to mature?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, there's so many different segments in Asia Pacific. I mean, in East Asia, I think most of the market that we have been looking at, it's already on the radar. If you are talking about like the surprises, I think maybe one of the region will be the Southeast Asia. I mean, we've had lots of attentions paid onto the market like Vietnam, both onshore, offshore. But I think there are also like huge potentials from Thailand, and not that much huge potential from Thailand, but because of the wind resources. But there are lots of good sites in Thailand and also Philippines. Indonesia is another one. These are the three like other big kind of hidden or sleeping market in Southeast Asia. I mean, all of this, there are movements there on the government side, on the policy side. Once those kind of like policy kind of hurdles or kind of gates will be open, we definitely will see more. Just to highlight a few, like in Philippines, I think the government is now trying to start the green auction this year, kind of create a solution to solve the permitting kind of barriers. Let's just wait and see how this auction will go. If it really works, it can unlock a lot of potential in this market. And we also heard that the PDP in Thailand is also being updated, and the renewable industry, the wind industry is pushing for much bigger and much higher target there. So these are the Southeast Asia. I mean, what surprised me also is the Central Asia. Like I said, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, these two countries also have surprisingly very good policies and high targets, and also strong movements already happening. So these are also like kind of should popping up in people's mind, like in the next few years.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's a very comprehensive answer. Just to let everyone know in the audience, we're about 2 or 3 minutes away from bringing the audience panelists onto stage, or bringing audience members on to join the panelists on stage, rather. But Fang, do you have any views about how you see the markets developing? Emerging markets, rather, in Asia.
Yeah, thank you. I think on top of what Li Ming mentioned, we have been at the GWAC Market Intelligence team here. We have colleagues sitting in different parts of the city in this region, India, Singapore, Beijing, and we monitoring, the turbine, order intakes and component and BOP activity, and in those emerging market, I think there are a lot of things going on, including the Asia Investment Banks, and also our partner, the World Bank AFC. They did a lot of work for those emerging market. Compared what we observed or we saw, couple of 2 3 years ago. I think the big difference is Central Asia. Last year, so the numbers Li Ming just present, Kazakhstan, we have the record installation. It's not coming from nowhere. Turbine OEM has been looking at the opportunity over there, I think 5 years ago. For example, the Chinese Gold One division, they all are there. And we even have, the Power China, the EPC contractor, they are looking at opportunity, the Central Asia country. From the supply side, not just the 2 Chinese turbine OEM or Chinese EPC, you saw the Italian, for example, Eni, that's a big renewable developer. And also you can see GE Renewable, Vista's already installed 2 projects over there. So many things have been going on. I think one thing from what we saw different is that the media in general or the industry normally pay more attention to like fancy or relatively bigger market, ignore what's going on. From the policy side, we in those regions, Li Ming could confirm, I think a lot of focus has been on emerging market in Southeast Asia, for example. It's true because we have some kind of challenge in terms of regulatory, like first in Taiwan, offshore reduction cost for feed-in tariff, and then Vietnam, we're in the middle of the crisis about where the industry is to grow. Are they going to extend the feed-in tariff, or what's the new plan from the PM, etc. But we do have those markets in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and a few others. They actually have their own renewable target setting either for 2030, 2040, but looking at the project pipeline or the investment, target made even by the energy, big energy company from SEC, from Saudi or somewhere. They are actually very active in this region. One of our member, for example, GWAC member called Aqua Power, they are looking at like 3 gigawatt, more than 3 gigawatt, wind project in those regions. So I think again, Stuart, if you want to ask me, something really new in terms of a trend, I think on top of what already has been discussed in Southeast Asia, it is still a key region for the future growth. But I believe that Central Asia, that absolutely should be some spot the industry need to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's a fascinating take. So I appreciate the insight. So now I'd actually like to take a turn to India and introduce our newest member of the GWEC team, Martin. Martin, can you tell me what's your perspective about what happened in India last year, and how do you see some of the bottlenecks, or where do you see some of the bottlenecks for the Indian market?
Thank you, Stuart. I think India has set a very ambitious target of installing 140 gigawatt by 2030. And I think this is quite encouraging. But we should also appreciate the fact that in recent years, there has been a slight slowdown in wind installations. 2020 was very much affected by the global pandemic. But still, we see that there has been almost close to 1100 megawatts of installation. And today, wind still remains to be the most dominant renewable energy source in the country. So I think there is an inclination towards increasing the share of wind power in the overall electricity mix. But like you rightly pointed out, that there have been bottlenecks varying right from the regulatory issues to issues related to acquisition of land and ISTS. So I think these are some of the issues which have led to a slowdown. Now we should be very happy about the fact that the latest bid that we saw reflected that there is a fall in the tariff. So the current latest bid received the lowest bid of 2.77 in comparison to the previous bid. So I think this is encouraging. But what really makes me happy is the fact that the government is keen on promoting hybrid parks. A very large scale hybrid park, solar wind hybrid park, was inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister of India in December in Gujarat. So I think a large number of issues that the wind sector is facing is also shared by the solar energy sector in India. And by promoting hybrid, the government of India is keen on facilitating the proliferation of wind power in the country. And hybrid parks, to a larger extent, help us in addressing the bottlenecks related to land acquisition, and issues related to transmission infrastructure and those kind of things. So I think that hybrid parks have to be promoted, and in the long run, this is going to boost interest of developers. It is really going to be an encouraging intervention for financial institutions. And finally, I would say that while some of the bottlenecks, for example, transmission infrastructure and land have been something that the country has been pondering for a long time, there is a need for innovative solutions. For example, we might need innovative financial instruments. Maybe there are RPOs, for example, available, but we need to think about instruments that can push the wind development further. We also see that there are certain issues that are quite perennial. For example, if we look deeper, we will see that the wind sector in India has, while the growth has been good in the past, in the recent years it has slightly slowed down. But with push of hybrid parks, like I said, there'll be a new boom, and we need to also understand that perennial issues, for example, poor financial health of DISCOMs. There has to be a joint initiative by the central government and the state government, because if the health of DISCOMs is not improved, certainly it is going to affect the interest of project developers. So this has to be prioritized. But at the same time, we also have to see that how newer financial instruments can help us in inciting interest of developers. And given the fact that India has set targets for both 2022 and 2030, and these are equally ambitious targets, given the fact that we have only 37 to 38 gigawatt of installation in place. So we really need to push our efforts, and it is essential that we not only address the regulatory barriers, but we also bring in place innovative financial instruments and promote hybrid parks, which will incite interest of project developers in the country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive answer. And I guess, we have GWIC India as a result of this. I mean, we see the Indian market as a huge potential, and very optimistic about what India can deliver once we get the right frameworks, etc., in place. So I'm very much looking forward to this. And anyone that has an interest in India, please reach out to GWIC, and we can put you in contact with the GWIC India organisation. It's now time to go to our guests on stage, and I'll ask the panel, or the guests rather, to, when they're asking their questions, to keep their questions short. And also, if you could just give a brief intro about who you are and where you come from, and which of the panelist member that you would like to direct the question to. If you don't have a particular panelist member, then I'll direct it to the most relevant panelist member. I'd also like to say that I can see that there's lots of questions coming in just on the chat. If we don't get you on stage and we see your question, we will get back to you with an answer. One of the team, the GWIC team, will get back to you with an answer after the webinar. So please keep the questions coming in. We'll try to get through as many as possible. But Merv, I'd like to bring you onto stage first. Can you just please say who you are and what your question is?
Yeah, thank you very much, Stuart, and thank you very much to all the panelists. My question is a general question. As we know, corporate demand is really driving, or has the potential to become a driving force in increasing the installed capacity. So I wanted to ask the panelists, how do you see the regulatory frameworks changing in your countries, or the region, or any specific country of your focus, to enable PPAs for corporates who want to, take part in this energy transition. How do you see it improving, moving on, or no improvements at all in, your area of work? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think actually we'll go to Dr. Hui first for this, if you can take that question, and then we'll go to Li Ming and then Martin.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Murph. Yes, I can touch on that a little bit. Yeah, I think overall the consumption for green power here is definitely a question to solve. So we do need more ways to consume green power, and PPAs is definitely one very good solution to that. And I think now there's a big group of people that are working to solve this this problem. I know there's some way to go. I cannot guarantee the time period, a few months or a few years, but it's definitely a topic to be discussed within the industry. And we are also making a few examples. For example, Goldwind, their campus, right? And for other places like industry campus also. So we want to do something to accelerate the process. And well, this is only in China. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, thanks, Li Ming.
I think just first to share statistics in last year, the corporate PPA signed in Asia Pacific totaled 1.65 gigawatt, which accounts for about 25 of the global CPPA. So that kind of reflects really like the trend. And the majority of that 1.65 gigawatt is done through Taiwan, the offshore, which brings us to Taiwan. So Taiwan, I think so far is the country that really have a very good corporate PPA kind of regulation that is already there, and really the government is encouraging that to happen. So that's and some other countries are also like trying to learn the experience from them. And then the next one that I think in the region is also like in Vietnam, we've seen like the first pilot of there's quite a few rules around the DPPA, which is direct power purchase agreement kind of phase to start in Vietnam. So that kind of like also making Vietnam again like to be the leaders in the Southeast Asia pack on this corporate PPA issue. And in the meantime, I think we've also seen quite a few like interests coming from Thailand and other Southeast Asia countries. And this kind of pressure is actually coming from the realization that these are like export or manufacturing countries, and these are the supply chain that is manufacturing the goods or the products for their clients. Their clients actually have like a compliance kind of like obligation under the RE100, which is now kind of being transferred into the supply chain, like the manufacturing supply chain in Thailand. And there is actually a big ask there to really start this corporate PPA because of that realization, because of that whole pressure coming from the RE100 multinational companies that are sourcing their supply chain in Southeast Asia. So I mean, these are kind of like the positive trends, but in terms of like the regulatory framework to really enable this, I think a lot of the countries are still like very much struggling. So still will take quite a few years to come. Yeah, that's on my side.
Thanks, Li Ming, for that perspective. Martin, I'm actually just going to stop you from answering because we have a couple of questions relating to India from the rest of the panelists, so the rest of the audience members. So Avinash, I'll bring you onto the stage now. Do you have a question? I believe you have a question in relation to the Indian market. If you could just turn your microphone on and camera on, if that's possible.
Yeah, I have a question wherein I had, I mean, most of the question was answered by Shardul, wherein he mentioned regarding the, the different schemes which we have to come up for making the discoms pay to the power producers. But at the same time, one additional question what I have is how do we see the offshore market for India. There were how to say a target of 5 gigawatt by 2020, but I don't see any push towards the offshore, and I would like to know how it could be taken up by India.
That's a great question. Thank you for that, Martin.
Well, Stuart, you are right. I think it's a very interesting question. Avinash, thank you for that. At GWEC India, we have been pushing for proliferation of offshore wind, and we see that there is a strong potential, and we are working jointly with our with the developers, with the central government and the state government on this issue. But I see that yes, there has been a drop in the progress, but like I said, that offshore is for sure is a big opportunity for the winter area. And now that the country is planning for a net zero, let's hope that India also commits to some target very soon. But we have already seen that the country has been a leader, and they have been at the forefront while declaring the INDCs, very ambitious INDCs. So at GWEC India, we feel that there is going to be a strong push very soon from government for the proliferation of offshore wind, and we should see progress very soon.
Thank you very much for that. I'm not sure if it was just me, but I had a little bit of, you froze a little bit there, but we heard the sound, or we heard your answer at least. I'm not sure if Marty's here. Marty, are you still on the stage? I'm not sure if you're on mute. Otherwise, no. Then I think that we've reached the end of all of the questions from the panelists, and we've gone over time, but we haven't quite hit the top of the hour yet. So please, everybody, thank you very much to all of the panelists for participating today. It was really fascinating to get a deep dive into what's been happening around Asia and Asia Pacific. I think it's a really interesting market, and I mean, to see the figures coming out of China as, I guess, really drawn a lot of attention to the global wind market being truly global these days, and it's great to see. It's a really great discussion to have. As you can see from the slide deck, we are heading very rapidly to the launch of our Global Wind Report 2021, which is going to be a fantastic document. So I hope that you all get ready to download that. But I'd like to hand back to Alyssa to wrap up the panel. Alyssa?
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks again to all of our panelists and experts for joining us today. That was super interesting. As Stuart mentioned, next Thursday, so 1 week from now, we are launching our annual Global Wind Report. This is the flagship publication of GWEC and one of the most anticipated reports for the wind industry in any given year. And this report is going to be bigger and better than ever. We have a whole chapter dedicated to wind power's role on the road to net zero, looking at decarbonization scenarios, oil and gas companies and their transition to renewables, sustainability in the wind industry. We also look at different enabling technologies that wind power can contribute to, such as Power-to-X and floating offshore wind. And then, of course, we're going to have our market status and market outlook. There was a lot of questions I saw coming in on market outlook. So please watch this space, because that market outlook is going to be part of our Global Wind Report launch. So if you scan that QR code there, you're going to be taken to the GWEC website, where you can see more information on all the different data releases, and also register for the Global Wind Report launch next Thursday. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter so that you are notified when the report comes out and can download it. And if you have any questions in the meantime, as Stuart mentioned, please feel free to send us an email. So I've just put my email on the screen there. You can also just message us at info@gwec.net email, and we can answer your questions. Thank you everyone for joining us today, wherever you are in the world, and have a great, evening, afternoon, morning, and we hope to see you again next Thursday, for the Global Wind Report launch. Thanks everyone.